Barbara and I celebrated our 12th wedding anniversary, having been childhood sweethearts since the age of 10. Instead of pursuing college, I landed an entry-level position as a draftsman at Desmond Engineering right after high school. A year later, we got married, and the following year brought us the joy of becoming parents to twin girls, Bethany and Brittany. Despite the initial challenges, careful budgeting helped us overcome any financial difficulties. As I continued to work as a draftsman, I gradually advanced in my career, improving our financial situation. We were able to buy a modest home and own 2 decent cars. Although they were not brand new, they were far from outdated. Barbara fulfilled her dream of being a housewife, with our financial stability meaning she didn't need to work. Both of us remained in good health and shape. Barbara had grown a bit since our wedding day, standing just over 5 feet tall, with dark brown hair and bangs resembling little Mary Osmond. Personally, my physique hadn't changed much since my high school football days as a right tackle. About a year ago, my friend Bob Martin moved to Reading from Lancaster and took a job at Desmond Engineering as a surveyor. Bob and I had played football against each other, and we immediately became friends. He also married his high school sweetheart, a redhead named Amanda. Amanda and Barbara instantly hit it off and became friends as well. Even though they didn't have children yet, they were ideal companions. When we weren't at work, Bob and I enjoyed spending time together, offering a pleasant break from family life. Barbara and Amanda did the same, going shopping together and attending parties and club meetings while Bob and I watched the girls on TV. Amanda also found a job as a secretary at Gilbert Engineering, located just outside the city. Around 6 months ago, I started noticing some changes. What was previously a monthly PTA meeting now took place once a week. Despite not having children, Amanda always visited Barbara, and the frequency of Tupperware and Magic Chef parties seemed to increase. However, they never made any purchases. They joined a book club, but somehow never found time to read. On weekends, they spent hours shopping but bought very little. Barbara's collection of fashionable lingerie grew, yet I never got to see any of it. It started to bother me, but I didn't mention anything to Bob because he didn't seem to care. I didn't want to create problems if there was nothing to be concerned about. One night, about an hour after putting the girls to bed, Barbara came home from some kind of basket party. She took a shower before Amanda picked her up and took another one right after she returned. That struck me as odd. While she was in the shower, I quickly checked her basket and found a set of black lace lingerie. Who wears black lace lingerie to a basket party? I'm not the type to go through my wife's underwear. But I did it that night and discovered that the underwear was wet and sticky. I discreetly put them in my pocket. Until that night, I had never snooped into my wife's purse or wallet. The only thing I was interested in was her cell phone. It seemed like she was pretty confident I wouldn't snoop around, because she hadn't deleted a single call in the past week. Most of the calls were to and from Amanda, but there were also several calls to unknown numbers, KSKH and KGO. Naturally, I had no clue who they were, but I quickly deduced that C stood for cell, A for home, and DOE for work. I checked Barbara's address book, and Amanda had 3 similar numbers listed as well, Amanda S, Amanda H, and Amanda Dolu. I was amazed at how organized my wife's phone was. Looking at Amanda's work number, I noticed it had an extension. When I checked Katie's number, it turned out to be the same as Amanda's, but with a different extension. It wasn't hard to guess that Barbara was in frequent contact with someone who worked with Amanda. It was also obvious that Amanda must have been the one who introduced Barbara to the mysterious company, K. Gilbert Engineering, which had apparently shut down. Curiosity got the better of me, and I dialed Katie's number using Barbara's phone. As I approached Ken Sanders' desk, a recorded message informed me that he wasn't available at the moment and suggested leaving a name and phone number for a callback. After the prompt, I hung up the call, finding the whole process surprisingly easy. Barbara poked her head into the doorway and asked if I was going to bed. I replied that I would join her once I finished the book, acknowledging the possibility of dozing off on the sofa. My real intention, however, was to sleep on the couch. It was a restless night filled with thoughts of what I might have done wrong or differently. It was a futile waste of time and mental energy. Every time I tried to focus on what I should do next, my mind kept looping back to the same thoughts. I constantly checked the clock, but time seemed to stand still. The only thing I knew for certain was that I wouldn't accept any blame for what had happened or what might happen next. I woke up to the sounds that were echoing throughout the room. My 2 little angels were cooking breakfast. Barbara let them take care of themselves instead of waiting. The idea was good, and it seemed to work. Stretching and rubbing my eyes, I noticed my wife enter the room and remind me that I have to hurry, otherwise I will be late for work. I assured her that this was not a problem, as I was not going to work today. She asked why, and I explained to her that I had too many personal problems. Yawning, I headed for the bathroom, realizing that I would need to take a shower upon my return. Barbara looked a little confused, as the girls had already left for school. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table opposite my wife. She looked at me with some doubts, as if expecting something, but unsure of what exactly. I asked her directly to tell me the details about her affair, feeling that she might not be ready to open up and share her thoughts. In response, she asked if my low mood was caused by suspicions of her infidelity. I confirmed my concerns and insisted on discussing the novel. Despite the fact that we had been married for 12 years, she asked why I had such thoughts. I insisted on discussing her novel, citing my work responsibilities for that day and refusing to participate in the games. My wife sighed in exasperation with tenderness and leaned over, assuring me that there was no romance in her novel. I ironically acknowledged her honesty, but expressed my inability to appreciate it at the moment. She leaned back in her chair, taking a sip of coffee, as if she had the situation under control. I asked if she could answer a few simple questions, to which she agreed. I asked her why she attends the PTA meetings so often every week, even though the secretary of the committee stated that they were held only once a month, and she had not attended them for 6 months. In response, she expressed her bewilderment and lost a little of her impudence, claiming that she did not understand what I was hinting at. I pointed out that she and Amanda go to non-existent meetings every Tuesday and asked why she was lying about such a matter. Barbara thought about the question for a while and finally found the answer. She apologized, explaining that on Tuesday nights she and Amanda go to the Rosie Cantina for a ladies' evening to enjoy margaritas at the 2 for the price of 1 promotion. They didn't tell me about it to avoid misunderstandings related to Bob and me. She admitted that it was a mistake and promised now to inform us in advance. I remained skeptical and stated that I would check her explanation. I suggested that Amanda confirm her words, but I doubted what they would say at Rosie Cantina. In response, she stressed that I was making a big story out of it. Then she changed the subject and asked about my behavior at small parties with plastic dishes, asking why I take a shower before leaving and immediately after returning home. I explained that this was to eliminate the smell of smoke from the hair, as many women smoke at such meetings. She kept asking me why I was wearing fancy underwear at these parties, but not for her, unless it was a special occasion. I admitted that I don't have a good answer, saying that I just want to feel dressed up when I go out. Barbara's lies were starting to annoy me, and it was hard for me to control my anger, realizing that it was time to start talking. I confronted her with the dirty underwear I found last night, accusing her of cheating. I expressed my awareness that the substance on the laundry did not belong to me, and warned her not to talk about the possibility of a yeast infection. My anger began to grow, and I demanded an explanation. Barbara was nervous in her chair, avoiding his gaze. It seemed that she could not give a quick answer. Furious, I continued to insist, asking why she came home with dirty laundry, and insisting on an explanation. She begged me to stop and expressed her inability to tolerate this situation anymore. Tell me that we've been married for 12 years. Why are you treating me this way? The continuous stream of lies and constant denial overwhelmed me, but I still tried to gather my strength. I threw my half-filled coffee cup across the room, smashing the front panel of the microwave oven. This time there is no doubt that I have attracted Barbara's attention. The expression on her face was new, as she had never seen my anger before. Crouching over the table, I loudly bumped into her, demanding information about Ken Sanders. She got up from her chair and approached the sink, trying to avoid conversation and repeatedly saying that he was just a friend. I continued to insist, asking if she had a close relationship with him. With fear in her voice, she admitted it. I then kept pushing, asking if she had slept with him last night. With regret in her voice, she confirmed this, begging me to stop and expressing sincere apologies. She was standing at the sink, through tears. As I was pouring myself fresh coffee, I heard Barbara's phone ring. Her gaze darted nervously between me and the phone as she suggested answering it, disclosing the caller as Ken. I pressed the speakerphone button and greeted Ken, who sounded distressed, mentioning a call attempt on his work number the previous night. Barbara appeared frozen with fear, and I gave her a nod of acknowledgement. She hesitated in responding to Ken's inquiries about her presence and whether something was wrong, but eventually admitted that I was also present and aware of their situation. I stepped in, addressing Ken and informing him that I had some matters to attend to in the morning, but promised to visit him in the afternoon. I advised him to have emergency numbers on speed dial. Ken remained silent on the line, unwilling to hang up. Ending the call, I returned the phone to my pocket. Barbara, now in her robe, stood at the sink, trembling. Expressing my intention to leave, I posed one final question about the guy Amanda was dating. She pleaded with me not to ask, and in her distress, she hurled the second cup across the room, causing it to shatter against the tiled wall behind the sink. In a rush, she provided the name as Kelvin, specifically mentioning Kelvin Bostic. She informed me of her return later in the afternoon and requested me to clear out my belongings before then. She mentioned her mother staying with the girls temporarily and assured assistance in retrieving any items I couldn't fit in my car. Emphasizing not to contact her, she asked me to inform her mother of my whereabouts. As I walked out the door, she remained motionless, offering no additional words. Naturally, I was at a loss for what to do next. I decided to head to the office and see Bob. Considering him a friend, I believe he should be informed about the ongoing situation. It didn't come as a surprise when I found Bob absent from the office, likely engaged in some form of gambling or similar activities. I dialed his cell phone and shared the distressing news about Barbara and Amanda's secret boyfriends, revealing that the supposed meetings and Tupperware parties were actually social gatherings. Bob questioned the credibility of the information and found it difficult to believe. I suggested asking Amanda about Kelvin Bostic, suspecting that she might have introduced Barbara to someone at their workplace. Bob expressed disbelief upon learning about Kelvin Bostic, as they had graduated together. I also mentioned a guy named Ken Sanders, describing him as tall and skinny. I shared my belief that Barbara would likely warn Amanda soon, as she had given me various excuses before finally confessing. After our conversation, I went to HR to request a short leave, finding it impossible to focus on work. It took only 10 minutes to transfer my tasks to another draftsman. Meanwhile, Barbara's cell phone rang, displaying Amanda's name on the caller ID. I answered the call, pretending to be Barbara, and inquired about the situation. Amanda apologized, mistaking me for Barbara, and mentioned that Bob had received information at the office. Expressing my anger and disgust, I asked Amanda to clarify what someone had said to Bob. She revealed her intention to take Barbara home, and suggested that bothering her in that moment was inadvisable, as she was busy packing her belongings. Surprised by this revelation, I questioned the reason for packing, and learned that Barbara planned to temporarily live with her parents. Enjoying the silence on the other end of the line, I couldn't help but smile, imagining the scenarios running through Amanda's mind. In response, I advised her to inform Kelvin about Bob's imminent arrival, implying that he might appreciate a head start. Amanda reacted with shock and disbelief, exclaiming, "No, God, no," before abruptly ending the call. This woman's nerves were clearly frayed. Canceling our one credit card was no issue, and changing the PIN for our ATM or debit card took me just 5 minutes. Figuring out what to do with our checking account was another matter, so I put it on hold for now. In any case, I needed it for paying utilities and other bills. I just hoped Barbara hadn't taken any receipts with her. The cell phone rang again, but this time, it was my phone. Bob had chased Kelvin Bostic out of the Gilbert building and caught him in the parking lot. He was now in jail and wanted me to relay the message to his brother from Lancaster, urging him to come and post bail. I made the call to his brother. There was nothing more I could do for Bob, so after lunch I went to Taco Bell. I visited my mom and dad, explaining everything to them. Mom was more than willing to watch the girls for a while. She stayed with me during the week, and the twins stayed with them on the weekends. Now it's time to visit Ken Sanders. The guys from Gilbert's design department eagerly told me about Bob's visit that morning. They saw everything that was happening because their office had a view of the parking lot. Bob intercepted Calvin as he was heading to his BMW. He threw him over the hood of one of the cars and started beating his face. The guards went after them, but couldn't get Bob out of there. Eventually, one of them hit Bob in the neck with a tranquilizer gun. He had not yet come home when they put him in a police car. Kelvin was taken to an ambulance. One of the guys showed me the office where Ken Sanders worked. It was empty. It seems that old Ken suddenly left this morning. We walked past Amanda's desk. She wasn't there, but it seemed like she was still working here. 10 minutes later, I found out Ken's home address and headed for the parking lot. It was a small ranch without a garage. A white Lexus with an open trunk and rear doors was parked at the entrance. When I got to the door, Ken Sanders came out with a handful of clothes. He dropped everything and hurried back to the house. As soon as he saw me, I tripped over the fallen things and managed to see him come out from behind. When I entered, I couldn't help but laugh. Dan, I didn't look like Bob. I was a good guy, It seemed to be the type of place that was rented out fully furnished. That's why he didn't have a truck. After another 10 minutes, he would have finished and left the city. I was looking forward to talking to Ken, but I didn't want to pursue him. I looked around the room for something interesting and got some pleasant surprises. The first thing I took was his cell phone. He was lying on the table in the living room next to a folder containing his passport and some personal documents. There was a cute laptop on the dining table. I didn't find anything else, so I collected all the rewards I had and left. I didn't want to do something that could be considered a crime, so I resisted the urge to smash his car. It was beautiful. I think it's a crime to take things from the house, but he left the door open, and anyone could have taken them. Without restraining myself completely, I let the air out of one of his tires. I'll have to empty the truck to get the spare tire, and I'm sure he'll do it with one eye on the street looking for me. I'll pick it up later. He got the message. I went to the prison to see Bob. He was busy with his brother and the lawyers, so I just waved and smiled at him. It looks like he has everything under control. Mom was already at home and dinner had started. We talked for a while, and then I brought the things I bought from Ken to the office where my computer and stuff were stored. Before I could examine them carefully, Beth and Britt returned from school. I decided it was better to let them know what was going on before they started asking questions. I didn't have that opportunity. Bethany greeted me joyfully and started asking questions about why Grandma was present and was interested in Mom's whereabouts. I explained that my mother and I had decided to take a little break from each other, and she would be staying with her parents for a while. Brittany was pleased with the news and announced that she had won the bet with Bethany. She bragged about her victory and explained that their argument was about my mom cheating on me. Bethany, however, denied that she had ever said anything about her mom cheating and claimed that they were not naive and knew what was going on. She admitted that Brittany was right and that Mom really cheated on me. Expressing surprise at how I found out, she condemned me for being slow and too trusting. Brittany, making an unusual move, put her hand on my shoulder, trying to comfort me. The situation was surreal, a 12-year-old girl trying to comfort her father in a family crisis. One Saturday, when Mom and Amanda said they were going to go shopping in the King of Prussia, Mom wouldn't let Britt and me go with them. She said it was an adult day and that she would reward us later. When we got to school on Monday, 2 kids said they saw her with a guy in Nobles Grove. We called them liars, but one of the girls had a photo on her cell phone. It seemed pretty insignificant. I thought there had to be an explanation, but Britt said she was cheating. Why didn't you tell me anything? Both of them just shrugged their shoulders. A couple of weeks later, Tracy Mercer's parents saw Amanda, Mom, and 2 guys at TGI Fridays in Allentown. They told Tracy about it when they got home. I was stunned. Thank God Grandma invited us to dinner. We didn't discuss this issue during dinner, and I apologized before dessert was served. Fortunately, the twins decided not to bring up the subject for the rest of the evening. I felt relieved. I had just started disassembling Ken's laptop when his cell phone received a text message. The message read, "Dear Ken, I'm sorry for the problems. I love you, Barbara." Not being the most skilled at messaging, I managed to decipher this communication. The sender was Amanda, using Barbara's cell phone, indicating that Amanda and Barbara were together. Succumbing to temptation, I couldn't resist informing Barbara of my possession of Ken's cell phone by spelling out TJ. For the next few hours, I delved into the files and folders on Ken's computer. Although I didn't find any emails exchanged between Barbara and Ken, I stumbled upon intriguing correspondences between Ken and some old acquaintances in Lancaster. The revelations within shocked me, leaving me feeling deeply unsettled. Barbara and I had spent nearly our entire lives together, yet now I discovered that I never truly knew her. In less than a year, she seemed to have developed a closer bond with Ken than she had with me in our 2-decade relationship. As I replaced the printer cartridge, tears streamed down my face, an unusual reaction for me. Her deceit had wounded me, and now the salt of my tears aggravated the wounds. I printed out several emails and a dozen photographs. I would have taken more pictures, but I ran out of expensive paper. None of the images were explicit or suggestive. They were all suitable for any audience. Beth interrupted my solitude, asking if she could call her mother. I didn't feel I could refuse. My mother was with the twins while they conversed with Barbara, and she overheard everything. Mom later informed me that the girls didn't hold back and held Barbara responsible for the entire ordeal. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. The emails were engrossing. Ken had successfully applied and secured a job as an engineer for an alternative energy project in Spain, with a start date in 6 weeks. It seemed he didn't inform Gilbert about his departure. I'm certain Amanda knew, but no one else mentioned it. Ken had all the necessary documents prepared for the trip, except for my passport. I suppose he could find a replacement, but time was of the essence if he aimed to set a start date. Perhaps he could resort to reporting it stolen to the police, but I doubted he would go that route. He hadn't booked his plane tickets yet. Among the letters to a close friend, one shed light on the situation. Barbara planned to initiate a divorce once she joined Ken in Spain. Knowing I would never permit her to take our daughters out of the country, she intended to declare me an unfit father. The letter didn't elaborate on her strategy, but it hinted at severe measures that could potentially strip me of my visitation rights and custody. It was utterly despicable. Ken authored this letter, so it was all hearsay. I would have preferred an original message from Barbara, but I had to make do with what I had. I printed out several copies of this letter. Mom dozed off while watching Lennon, so I directed her to our bedroom. The girls had already retired to bed. I fell asleep on the couch, waking up to the aroma of fresh coffee and bacon. Mom always prepared a hearty breakfast. The girls were finishing their cereal when I joined them at the table. Before I could start cooking eggs, I endured some good-natured teasing. The conversation remained casual until it was time for the bus. I expressed my concerns to the girls, informing them that their mother might attempt to separate us by branding me an unfit parent in order to maintain custody. I reiterated my willingness to share custody for their happiness, but stressed that I wouldn't relinquish my right to be with them. I urged them not to take sides, remain cautious, and not believe any falsehoods. Brittany reassured me, claiming they were smarter than I realized and that they loved Mom, but wouldn't let her harm me. She smiled, and Beth gave me a thumbs up before they left. After their departure, Mom refilled my cup and joined me at the table. She encouraged me to relax, assuring me that everyone was on my side. Following a shower and shave, I dressed slightly more elegantly than usual. It felt strange leaving the house with 3 mobile phones, and I made a mental note to acquire the cell phone charger Ken had given me. Although I probably wouldn't need it, I preferred to be prepared. Upon arriving at the Family Services office, I waited for the caseworker's call and was surprised to find that the person assisting me was Jody Mitchell, whom I hadn't seen in over 10 years. She greeted me, reminiscing about our shared past in high school. She recalled our time as part of the goth group that faced social exclusion, especially from athletes like me. Although she appeared much different now, with normal-looking attire, I couldn't forget her pink hair, black lipstick, and dark eye makeup. The sign on her desk read J. Mitchell, suggesting she likely hadn't married. 12 years ago, her appearance would have been expected, but now she appeared ordinary. "John, what can I do for you?" she asked. Her question interrupted my train of thought. I stuttered a little and noticed Jody's appearance, to which she grinned at my awkwardness. I apologized if my words were awkward, and she reassured me to relax. She shared that halfway through college she realized that she could look at the world for real, without a fake facade. Jody mentioned that for almost 10 years she had been what I would call normal, and felt much more comfortable that way. However, she admitted that she sounded patronizing at times and apologized for having trouble keeping her foot out of her mouth. Moving on, I asked Jody if there were any files or reports on me. She confirmed that there was nothing in my name or Barbara's, which indicated that it looked like we were providing for our children, not mistreating them. I confirmed that I have 12-year-old twin girls, Bethany and Brittany. Turning the conversation to the main topic, I explained that my wife planned to leave me and take the girls with her. Jody acknowledged the prevalence of such situations and asked if there was any specific reason for her actions. I pointed out that there were no supporting documents or accusations in their records expressing concern about possible setups. Jody explained that just because their computer wasn't showing anything didn't mean I was safe. She suggested that my wife might be collecting information, such as medical records or police reports, before reporting to their office. In response to my skepticism about being framed, Jody explained that she hadn't said I couldn't win. She asked why I thought my wife would take such actions. Despite my initial reluctance, I felt obligated to share an email from Ken. I passed the copy across Jody's desk and asked about its provenance. I explained that I had received an email from a computer using illegal access, declaring it unacceptable for legal purposes. I mentioned the word conspiracy without understanding its legal definition, and expressed my confusion and concern about how to protect myself and my daughters in this situation, especially since I couldn't afford to hire a lawyer. Jody Mitchell relaxed in her chair, and I maintained eye contact without blinking. She rocked back and forth before leaning over to me and offering to come the next morning. I agreed and asked if I could keep a copy of the letter for myself. After receiving confirmation, I left, and she said goodbye, saying that she was glad to see me. I smiled, and she returned the gesture, revealing a new side of Jody. Having no connections with lawyers, I decided to choose one from the phone book. Despite the fact that I knew about my wife's intention to divorce me, I wanted to secure my position, given the circumstances. I wasn't sure about our financial situation in the coming days, so I paid the lawyer in advance in cash for the entire package of services. I urged him to act in the fastest and easiest way, allowing her to get the house since it cost less than the mortgage. I insisted on joint custody of the twins, with the possibility of obtaining full custody if possible, and agreed to pay child support, but not maintenance. Bob called me when I was on my way to lunch looking for a place to live, and I offered to put him up. We met at Taco Bell for lunch, and when I walked up, Bob had a smile on his face. Out of curiosity, I asked the reason for his happiness. Bob shared that a friend from the local general hospital had informed him about Kelvin. Amanda visited him at the hospital, unaware of the arrival of Kelvin's wife and children. The situation became chaotic, which led to the fact that the hospital security took Amanda out. Bob walked past Gilbert to talk to her, but found that she was no longer there. I asked out the details of Kelvin's family situation, and Bob admitted that he did not know why Kelvin's wife did not live with him or why he did not come home to his family for the weekend. However, he expressed a lack of interest in these details. Bob decided to take a week off from work to sort out his affairs, and we planned to find him a place to live, since my mom also lived at home. Bob intended to go to his house to pack some clothes and personal belongings in case Amanda wasn't there. He wasn't going to talk to her anymore. Later, on my way to my insurance agent, I got another call from Cameron Wilcox, Barbara's father. He asked for my presence to help sort things out, mentioning Barbara's desperation and her useless mother. Cameron, Barbara's sister Lola, and I were supposed to be at the meeting. Despite the uncertainty about the purpose of the meeting, I agreed to be there in about 20 minutes. It was a gloomy meeting. I brought the evidence folder and had a coffee. Who wants to start? John, Barbara thinks you're overreacting. She insists that you got angry and forced her to tell lies to calm you down. According to her, she has done nothing wrong, and you have no right to evict her. I felt that my wife was presenting her parents with a highly embellished version of events. Although I understood her reluctance to admit infidelity, I resented that she was shifting the blame on me. Cameron expressed a desire to get the facts to better understand the situation, and asked what I expected him to do: prove that she was a liar, or admit that I had made a mistake. I explained that Barbara claimed she didn't have a boyfriend, but she just had a few drinks with friends from Amanda's work, interpreting it differently. I noted that she had more than 80 phone conversations with this friend in the last month, and asked about the frequency of calls to Cameron and her mother. They both turned to Barbara, who was avoiding eye contact. I raised the issue of Ken's cell phone, and when no one answered, I asked Lola to read the text message sent to Ken right after I asked Barbara to leave. The message apologized for the trouble and expressed love. Barbara covered her face with her hands, and Cameron slowly shook his head. I shared photos from a walk that Barbara and Amanda claimed was at the King of Prussia Mall, but was actually in Nebel Grove. Cameron asked Barbara about how they held hands in the photos, suggesting that Ken was more than just a friend. Tears slowly flowed as this unexpected outcome unfolded. I submitted more photos, indicating that they were taken at Olive Garden and Red Lobster. I mentioned the stains on Barbara's underwear, but decided not to discuss them at that moment. Cameron apologized for calling me out in such a situation, expressed his chagrin at being tricked, and shook my hand as I left. Barbara left the room crying like a child. At that time, there was no discussion of stains on her underwear. Cameron assured me that the situation would not be ignored. Back at home, Mom and Bob had already set up a folding bed in the living room. It wasn't a hallway, but just a small additional room where I kept my computer. Bob had a pile of spare clothes in the corner that he had taken from home. Amanda wasn't at home when he arrived. The most interesting thing that awaited me was the mail, but it wasn't really waiting for me. It was for Barbara. A beautiful official envelope from the passport department. I knew I shouldn't open it, but I couldn't help myself. It was, of course, a passport, or rather, a family passport. The photo was of Barbara and 2 girls. I remember the girls mentioned that they were photographed, but I could not imagine that it was done for such a purpose. Of course, my passport was not in the envelope. I immediately called Cameron and asked him to inform Barbara that the goods had arrived. If she needed a passport, all she had to do was send Ken home to pick it up. I would only give it to Ken. I was usually at work when the letter arrived. I would never have known she got it. Cameron informed me that they had asked Barbara to find another place to live, and they had no idea where she was going. They seemed to be a little angry with their daughter. He promised to inform her about the passport. The conversation at dinner mostly revolved around the girls. Bethany mentioned with a shy smile that a family services woman named Jody had visited their school and talked to both of them. Because of the long conversation, they skipped physical education and geography. Beth and Britt said that Jody seemed to like me, even though it was from an hour-long conversation. Lola interrupted dinner with a phone call, wanting to talk. We met at McDonald's, where she explained Barbara's situation. Lola had expressed doubts about my ability to answer questions, which I agreed with. She began by blaming Amanda for everything, describing Amanda's affair with Bob as exciting and romantic in Barbara's eyes. Barbara claimed that her life with me was only loving and reliable, without excitement and romance. Barbara met Ken Sanders when he joined Gilbert. While Amanda and Calvin were making love, Barbara and Ken were left alone, which led to a full-blown romance. She was unable or unwilling to put an end to it, as Ken charmed her with stories about his beginnings and offered a trip to Spain, which she gladly accepted. The main dilemma for Barbara was not to leave me, but to leave the girls. She knew that I would never let her take them abroad, so she planned to find a way to make me look bad. Lola had explained that after talking to the girls, Barbara realized that they were closer to me than to her. As a result, she decided not to seek custody if I agreed to a divorce, without any conditions. I agreed to continue without disputing it. Then Lola mentioned that Barbara would like to get her passport and asked if I had it with me. This raised suspicions about Barbara's intentions, and I suspected that she might still be hoping to take the girls with her. The family passport played a crucial role in the deal. Lola, my coffee is cold. I'm going to go home and take a hot shower. Don't call me again, John. What the hell is wrong? What did I do to make you angry? You know damn well what you've done. Do you two really think I'm that stupid? Go back to your sister and tell her that she will never be able to give birth to my daughters. Since you have decided to do this, help her. I have to ask you never to talk to my girls again. Carla was talking on her cell phone when I left Mickey D's. I can only guess who she was calling. I arrived at the family services office before it opened. You couldn't stay away from me, could you? Jody walked into the office with a big smile on her face and a Starbucks cup in her hand. She motioned for me to sit down and apologized for not drinking more coffee. I think you know that I talked to your daughters yesterday. I nodded and smiled. For some reason, I was a little tongue-tied, out of place. I remembered that the same thing happened the last time I talked to her. Since I've been with Barbara all my life, I've never had the opportunity to develop any communication skills with other women. It looks like I've paid for it now. Is something wrong, John? Other than that? No, I wasn't trying to be smart. I just couldn't formulate the words. I'm so sorry, Jody. I think I better leave. I'm not aware of all this morning. I'll call you back later. Before you leave, I would like you to know that I am getting a restraining order against your wife. I can't stop her from seeing the girls or being with them, but I can stop her from taking them out of state or deny you access to them. The letter will be delivered to her before noon. It brought a big smile to my face, but I left the office anyway. I headed to the nearest Starbucks. This coffee definitely smelled delicious. Until today, everything was under control. Now I felt discouraged and confused. I drove around the city aimlessly for a while before heading home. Bob informed me that Amanda had moved into her parents' house near Frida, so he would only return to his apartment until he could sell it or rent it out. He spent the morning at the bank, insurance company, and law office hoping to get some money from Gilbert. Unfortunately, they did not have a company policy against fraternization, which made his efforts an uphill struggle, as his lawyer explained. Passing by the hospital, he found that Kelvin was being discharged. Kelvin's wife, in the process of filing for dismissal, intercepted Bob, expressing her gratitude for his help and explaining her attempt to convince Kelvin to drop the charges. Surprisingly, she tried unsuccessfully to fix the situation with Kelvin for several years. After Bob left, I sat on the porch, sipping a beer. Mom brought me a meatloaf sandwich and silently joined me, sharing a beer. She mentioned that Dad would come to dinner and stay the night. When Jody Mitchell arrived, Mom disappeared into the house. Jody sat down next to me, refusing the cold beer I'd offered. We sat in silence for a few moments before she spoke. About an hour ago, I submitted the documents to Barbara. She was very upset that she stayed with her sister. I finished the long neck I was holding in my hands. It may seem good, but why do I feel so bad? There's nothing good in these situations, John. It's just not that bad. I took out another beer, hesitated, and returned it to the refrigerator. Could you come in and explain all this to the girls? I get along with them, but no matter how carefully I phrase it, it might sound like I'm blaming their mother. I'm afraid it might alienate them. How about 7 in the evening? I nodded and she stood up, heading for her car. Halfway there, she looked back, a positive sign, and I smiled. She smiled back. Jody visited us that evening and spent a lot of time with Beth and Britt. Bob and I searched his house, removing anything that belonged to Amanda or reminded him of it. Jody began to visit us often, several times a week, spending as much time with my mom as she did with the girls. I noticed that she was avoiding me. Although it suited me, I was curious. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, she sat down next to me. I felt the need to talk to her, but she started the conversation on her own. She asked if I had any wine, preferably with a cork. I explained that I had wine, but they'd all had screw caps. She thought it was funny, and she asked for something red, so I poured the bottle into a container that looked more like a jug. While we were drinking, I steeled myself to discuss the girls' well-being during her visits. She mentioned that the twins were fine and they didn't have to see her. Surprisingly, she explained that she had come to see me, not the girls. I was confused as she rarely entered into conversation during her visits. She admitted that she thought I might have a rule against fraternizing with clients, which amused both of us. To lighten the mood, she brought up the topic of tattoos and expressed surprise that I hadn't asked to see it. I admitted that since my school days I had 4 tattoos, 3 of which were clearly visible, and 1 was more inconspicuous. She playfully suggested playing tattoo search, keeping quiet so as not to wake the girls. The 4th tattoo was in a secluded place, and I admired it for a while before it left, obviously before the twins woke up. However, I felt that they might have been aware of what had happened. I instructed my lawyer from the phone book to prepare and deliver the divorce papers. Barbara, who still lives with Lola, received the documents, but there was no response. A few more weeks passed, and my father's health deteriorated. Mom spent more time with him than with me. Fortunately, school was over and the girls spent the summer with her. By the end of the summer, Dad moved into a nursing home. Bob and I helped Mom prepare the family home for sale, and she moved back in with me. Jody stayed with the girls at their mother's all summer and spent 3 or 4 evenings a week with me. They went shopping and had dinner together, and I appreciated the attention Brittany and Bethany paid. At least I didn't envy them anymore. I was pretty sure they knew what was going on between Jody and me. Barbara called the girls about once a week, but the conversations were always short and, according to her mother, seemed tense most of the time. The twins didn't even tell me she called. Bob's divorce from Amanda was finalized. I had no idea what my status was. He also decided that he wanted to start his own surveying business and asked me to go with him. I didn't have enough money to contribute until my mom came to the rescue. When she and her father ran out of money, Medicare took over his expenses. Instead of watching it all disappear, she thought I should use it for business. I suppose she also saw it as an investment in her future. 3 months later, Bob and I had our own small surveying business. I suppose she also saw it as an investment in her future. 3 months later, Bob and I had our own small surveying business. Fortunately, my drawing skills have evolved into drawing stories. About a week after the start of the new semester, the twins were visited by their mother. They thought they were going to the consulting room to see Jody, and they were both disappointed to see Barbara. They tried their best to be polite and respectful towards her, but they still failed. She told them that she loved them both and was sorry that things had turned out this way. She was going to Spain to see the windmills and would send them some postcards. She promised to call them every year on their birthday and send them amazing Christmas gifts. They said she was crying when she left. Barbara never called me to tell me she was leaving, but the following week her parents showed up at the house. They apologized again for what Barbara had done, but made no attempt to defend her or justify her actions. Brittany and Bethany were their only grandchildren, and they wanted to be able to see them. I did not hesitate to respond to their request. They told me that Lola was too ashamed to approach me, torn between her sister and her parents. 2 months later, my divorce was formalized. Jody and I decided to celebrate this event at Red Lobster. It was a rare evening without the girls, who seemed content. In fact, I think they were in some high spirits. We spent the night at the local Holiday Inn. The twins greeted my return with delight at 10 o'clock the next morning. Although they didn't talk about it out loud, they smiled from ear to ear throughout the day. A year later, everything was going well, but unfortunately, my father passed away. Mom considered moving to Florida with her sister, but didn't want to leave the girls. The twins thought their grandmother should leave, but offered Jody to take her place, even if she couldn't cook as well as my mom. They'd also insisted that they were old enough to have separate rooms. It was an obvious and viable plan. The girls received greeting cards from their mother, but there were no phone calls. She also sent many postcards, all depicting Spanish windmills. I wasn't sure of their significance. For Christmas, she sent 2 stylish dresses with embroidery, unaware that the girls were entering adolescence and could grow up dramatically. Surprisingly, they didn't mind that the dresses were too small. Gilbert Engineering has become our main customer. Bob was pleased to learn that Kelvin now teaches electronics at the Lebanon County Vocational School, which significantly lowered his rating. Calvin was no longer married, and Amanda were married and moved to California. Ken Sanders did not last even 6 months at his new job. He is now working in the States, but his whereabouts remained unknown. Bob requested information through his high school alumni association. My best friend always thought I got away with talking to Ken too easily. Strangely enough, the girls continued to receive postcards with images of windmills, without any specific information, only general feelings. Cameron informed me that Barbara had called them several times from her job at a travel agency in Barcelona. She never mentioned Ken or revealed details about their past. Jody and I got married quietly in Maryland. A year later, she was expecting a baby, and Brittany and Bethany were just as excited as we were. They were looking forward to the appearance of the godsister and shared a personal joke that they never told me about. The meaning of Spanish windmills remained a mystery to me.